Could I hire you to set me up every time I speak?
Yes,
Because
sir.
that was, I mean, I could sit down actually now because you did a great job. Thank you.
I'm pretty inexpensive. I don't.
Well, me too. I don't know.
Why
They can
you
hear. They
laughing?
can hear us. Oh my God, that's hilarious.
All right, You guys need to mute yourself. I don't need to hear all that laughter.
You guys having a good time so far? Sounds like it. Thank you, Tony. And excuse my frogginess. I'm getting over a chest cold, and it's just, whatever. It's just a nuisance. So good morning. It's good to see a lot of familiar faces. I am a member of this church, even though I haven't been in a while. It's just a thing. But it's good to be here on Wednesday morning with you guys. So yeah, I wrote a book. Nobody raised their hand. I mean, David's got a manuscript. The easy part is writing it. The hard part is getting it out. And so we're starting that process with my book, which actually took me, are you sitting down? It took me 4 years to write this book. I may get into that later. But now it's done. And so people are going, okay, so why'd you write a book? What's the book about? And who is the book for? Okay, why did I write a book? All right, well, so my background, some of you know, I was a Marine officer for a chunk of time. And I was an educator and a coach for a large chunk of my professional life. And in those two jobs, I worked with young people. It's just the nature of the beast. You're a Marine officer, you work with young hard chargers. And when you're a teacher and a coach, you work with Blake McAfee and a bunch of other hard chargers. And so, you observe things over the years. And one of the things I observed going back to the 80s is that things are changing when it comes to what it means to be a man. Now, I don't know whether you guys have noticed, but lately it's becoming more and more difficult to really know what it means to be a man in the world anymore. I think you guys probably know what I'm talking about. And not just a man, but a good man. And so I left education in 2018 because, frankly, I was fed up. Things had gotten really out of control, in my view. And I'm going, this is not what I signed up for. The inmates are running the asylum. And so it really bothered me. So I started to, think about it for just months on end. What's happened? And so that brought me to, well, how did I learn what I think it means to be a good man? And so that got me to thinking, and I thought, well, I had this guy, he taught me this. And then I had this guy, he taught me certain things. And I go, well, I learned these things from the role models and mentors I had growing up. And thank God I had them. And so what does it mean to be a good man? Well, I think good men have high moral character and integrity. I think good men are accountable and responsible for the things in their lives. I think good men have strong work ethic. Things like that. I was seeing that being eroded over time, and it really bothered me because we need strong, good men in the world. Always have, always will. So I thought, okay, well, how did this happen? I think a large part of it is that our culture has made it much more difficult and confusing than it really needs to be. And the other part, and this is really the kicker, is we've lost our faith. We've lost our faith. God is no longer part of the equation. And my feeling is, unless you have a foundation of faith in your life, you will never have an abundant life. And aren't we called to live an abundant life? I think God's no longer part of the equation. So I thought, okay, well, not only is the culture confusing everything, but God's not part of the picture anymore. So it's no wonder a lot of men are just kind of lost and really just don't know what they want to do in life or how to live a good life. So when I was thinking these things, and at 3 o'clock in the morning when you go into the bathroom and it comes to your mind, I go, well, these group of guys kept coming back to my mind when I was a youngster, starting about 9 years old. And I realized these guys were the ones that kind of taught me early on what it means to be a good man. And so I started to just kind of jot down stuff. This is how you start a book. You start writing stuff down. Started keeping a little journal. When I would think of things, I would just start writing them down. Next thing you know, I've got, a notebook of stuff, and I go, well, maybe I should put this together. Maybe there's something we can do with this. And so we did. So that's why I wrote the book. The book is designed to help the younger generations, not this crowd, because I think we all get it at this point in our lives. Doesn't age, pretty much give you the right perspective. It's one of the good things about being older. But I think the younger groups, man, they're lost. They just don't get it. They don't have a compass. They need one. I don't think they know they need it. And all of our kids are good kids, so to speak, but I just think they're lost. So I thought, okay, let's write this book. Maybe it can be like, a blueprint for the younger crowd to learn, well, this is how you do it. This is how you be a man. This is how you be a guy. This is what guys do. So next thing you know, I've got this book. It took me 4 years because I tried to do a lot of other stuff in between. And if you've ever written a book, you'll know that it's got to be a singular focus. You can't have a lot of other things going on because you'll never finish. So for 2 years, I'm working on this book and doing some other things similar, video-wise, and just blog posts and stuff like that. And I just couldn't get it done. And finally, the good Lord said to me, look, pal, this is what I want you to do. I want you to finish this book. This is what I want you to do. I want you to finish the book. So I stopped doing everything else, focused on the book. It took me about a year and a half. So, role models and mentors. Have you ever thought about yours? Have you ever thought about yours? Now, in the process of writing this book, I would ask people. And it was shocking because people had to think. A lot of people, no names came to mind. And that really kind of disturbed me because, my 6 men, one of whom is my dad, they came to mind pretty quickly, which meant they had a pretty good impact, I guess. But it was funny to watch the wheels turn as guys started to think about, guys our age, of course, we're older, so we have to really go back. It was funny to see those wheels turn and all of a sudden go, oh, well, yeah, this guy. And I say, okay, well, what did he do for you? And you could just see this kind of like light come on inside guys as they remembered back to men who had had a positive impact on them. It was like they were energized by the memory. And I thought, okay, this is good because we're on to something here. So think back to some of the people in your lives. Now, there's an opposite side to this, as there is with everything in life. There's the good, and then there's the not so good. How many of you had bad role models in your life? That's a rhetorical question. Don't need hands. They're out there. I had them. Trouble is, when you're in the midst of that experience, you don't understand the big picture. It's only when you get older and you learn a lot about life to understand how the two balance. So you have to be careful, just like everything in life, who you choose as role models. Sometimes we're not given a lot of choices. You just have to make the best of it. And one of the things I began to wonder was, has it always been this difficult to know what it means to be a good man? I would say this crowd would say, no, it hasn't. We're products of the greatest generation, pretty much all of us. And when you think about what they went through to get to adulthood, they had to, 10 years of depression, economic depression, then a world war. They had a different perspective, didn't they? Well, and we kind of learned all of that from them. Life is tough. Get over it. Man up, do your job, get it done. That's how, I think most of us grew up. Whining and complaining was never allowed in my house. I don't know about your all's house, but it never was. And that was a valuable lesson. So I don't think it's hard for us to understand that. I just think it's hard. And this has been like in 30 years. In 30 years that I've been in profession, whether Marines or education, it's happened in 30 years. It's kind of been like this. I don't know what kind of curve this is, but the curve I'm talking about started out slowly, and then all of a sudden it's just gone crazy. I think it's a real problem. Excuse me. So this is why I wrote the book, and I have 6 men. Some of you in here will know 3 of them. Some of you will know 4 of them. So the first guy was a guy named Mike Kevel, and I don't know if that name rings a bell. And I'm not going to give away, the whole story. But Mike was a lifeguard at the oceanfront, one of Dusty and Hugh Boys' lifeguards, and he was a friend of my brother Jimmy, who most of you know. And I met Mike in the summer of 1966 when I was 9 years old. And that summer I was helping my brother Jimmy at the beach because he was a lifeguard. Lifeguards were allowed to have helpers. So I helped him. And I got to know this guy, Mike Kevel. And Mike taught me. I knew Mike for about 6 weeks. 6 weeks. And yet he's in my book. Mike taught me at 9 years old that I had worth, that I mattered. Because he went out of his way to make me feel like I mattered and that I had worth. And when I got myself into a jam, he came to my rescue. And he taught me that it only takes a minute to make an impact that lasts a lifetime. A minute. That's all. 6 weeks. More of his story. His story. All these stories will bring a tear to your eye. Every time I wrote a chapter, I'd get all emotional about it because it's you're grateful for these people. The second guy is a guy named Dave Bedker. Nobody knows Dave Bedker. He was a counselor at Camp Greenbrier in Alderson, West Virginia. You know, Michael By, of course, knows Dave Bedker. John Moncure knows Dave Bedker. I'm sorry. Yeah. Dave was a counselor at Camp Greenbrier, and I went there for 2 summers when I was 10 and 11 years old. Dave was a unique individual, and he was my baseball coach. And to be quite frank, I was a hot mess at that age. I didn't mature as quickly as everybody else, and I was a little clueless on most things, and I was a marginal athlete at best. But Dave took me under his wing and worked with me during his off hours to improve my game and went out of his way to help me become a better baseball player and a better person. And what I learned from Dave was nothing of any value in this life comes easily. Everything takes hard work. And if it doesn't take hard work and sacrifice, then it's not worth doing it all. And he was legendary simply because Dave was the most highly competitive individual I've ever known. You could be playing tiddlywinks with Dave and he would just be laser focused. And when Dave did not win, and those times happened, he took it hard. I mean, it didn't matter what it was. He took it hard. But here's the thing. He never asked more of his players than he asked of himself. It was just, I don't know. So he taught me how to achieve things, that you can be better. He pushed me, stretched me. And the results, you'll see in the book, were good. The next 3 guys were NA guys. The first was Jet Kalana. Some of you may remember Jet. Jet came into my life when I was repeating 6th grade at Norfolk Academy. Yeah, so if those of you that understand the Norfolk Academy phenomenon, repeating is not a wonderful thing to have happen. But Jet Kalani came in and once again just accepted me for who I am and helped me to reach beyond where I thought I could go. And back in those days, as you guys remember, we played tackle football in lower school. Remember that? Pads, the whole works. Yeah, bull in the ring in 7th grade. So Jet was my 7th grade football coach. And he was tough as nails. I mean, he had boundaries. You didn't cross them. And if you did, stand by. There would be hell to pay. And you learn that, that's how life is. There's a right way and a wrong way. And that's just it. There's no gray area. Gray is now the major color in our world. Everything is gray. Not for Jet, but the other part about Jet was he had this side to him that was very sympathetic and empathetic. So he balanced fierceness with compassion. And very few guys can do that. You see a lot of guys that come across as being fierce and tough, and Jet was like that. But he also had a compassionate side to him also. And when I got into education, I went back to school, went to Old Dominion, did their program, and one of the things I had to do was to go shadow a teacher for a week. So I chose Jet. He was still teaching at Academy. I hadn't seen him in probably 20 years. So it was one of the greatest weeks of my life because he hadn't changed at all. He had mellowed to a degree, but he still had that command presence. All my guys had command presence. And they weren't overt about it. You just could look at them and see, okay, this guy's in charge. This guy's got it together. And I saw a side of Jet that week that I knew always existed, but I never saw when I was a student. And that was his compassionate side. We had teacher conferences that week. So I was allowed to sit in, and we had one conference with a mom, and it was a tough conference. The kid was a hot mess. And Jet said, this next one's going to be tough. And so the mom comes in, and actually she is wide open for help. And Jet was a master at handling this mom, reassuring her and giving her hope that her son, could pull out of this or whatever. And I went, man, this guy, he gets it. He really does. And what I realized from him is, life is tough. It's going to throw you curveballs. Things are going to happen that you don't like. So you better be strong enough, man enough to handle them. But when there's a time that you need a pat on the back or a hug, you got to be ready to do that also. Incredible guy. And then there's Dave Trickler. Many of you, not many of you, but I know a couple of you remember Dave. Dave was, he's hard to describe, but he was part of my life, almost my whole life from like 6th grade on, because he was at NA also. And he was just an extraordinary person in that he really cared. Now, I know some people will not feel this way, but this is my story. He really cared about his students. It was just amazing. And what I learned from Dave was he had more sports IQ than any coach I ever had. He just understood sports and how to win. Guy was 5'6", and just a remarkable athlete. And I remember I worked at the day camp at Norfolk Academy from the time I was 13 till I graduated, which is another reason why I got to know Dave so well. And every day at lunch, he would go out. You remember Fred Fink, Michael? Yeah. He would go out to the tennis courts. He's 5'6", and he'd go out to the tennis courts and play tennis with Fred Fink, who was a tennis player, and he'd beat him regularly. And I would watch sometimes, and Dave he was surgical. At 5'6", most tennis players are taller than that. But Dave just knew how to set things up. He knew tactically how to do things. And it was like, man, this guy just got sports IQ. But what I learned from Dave was, and this is the belly pass. What I learned from Dave was, if you prepare and execute to the best of your ability, then you can compete with any foe. Any foe. So we used to play the public schools on JV football. I was a JV football player. And we used to play Lake Taylor. We played Maury. We played Tab, Norview. And in my 2 years playing JV football, we lost twice, both times in Norview. And we kept thinking they brought varsity guys down to play us because they didn't want to lose to the private school pukes, right? Yeah. But we beat those guys because we out-executed them. Our fundamentals were perfect because we practiced them every day. Every day. And when Coach Strickler said, if we practice this and do it the right way, we'll be in a position to win. And he was right every time. So we believed in him. When I was going through a pretty nasty divorce in 1990, and I got out of the Marine Corps, come home, tail between my legs, and I was looking for a new job, living with my parents. 32 years old with 2 children, living with my parents. And so I was feeling pretty low. And so I went out. I decided, this was in April. I decided to go out to NA to watch a lacrosse game. So I thought might be nice just to go out, see a lacrosse game. I had played lacrosse. I really didn't want to see anybody. But I got out there and I realized immediately, well, that's a pipe dream. You're going to run into people. Of course, the first guy I run into is Dave Trickler. And it's like nothing happened. I probably hadn't seen him in 10, 15 years. It was like I hadn't seen him since yesterday. He goes, "Hey, Shep Jordan, how you doing, man? Good to see you. I heard you were back in town." And I'm going, how did he know that? And, mentors just know things. And so it was then that he was a master salesman. It was then that he said to me, "Listen, have you thought about what you want to do now that you're out of the Marine Corps?" And I thought, uh-oh, what's he up to? I said, "Well, no, Coach. I'm still on the government dole. I had worked up leave time. I'm still on the government dole till May, so I have a little bit of time. And I'm thinking about doing some, maybe in the finance world, stuff like that." He goes, "Oh, yeah, great, that's great. But listen," there's always a but with Dave. "Listen, have you given any thought to being a teacher and a coach?" Well, this came out of left field. And I go, "What?" I said, "Well, no, Coach, I haven't done that." He goes, "Oh, man, I think you'd be great." And I said, "Well, okay, thanks." I'm starting to look for trying to get out of this. How do I get out of this? Because that's not what I want to do. And I said, "Well, I don't know, Coach. I didn't play sports in college." He goes, "Oh, no. Don't worry about that at all. That doesn't matter." He goes, "It's really not about the X's and O's necessarily at this level. It's really about, can you motivate the kids?" And I thought, just like you had done for all of us, you motivated us to be winners. I said, "Well, I don't know, Coach." And then I said something I regret to this day. I said, "Coach, I don't know. You don't make any money in education." And I said this to a guy that I greatly admired who had dedicated his life to that very thing. And he just chuckled and said, "Oh, I know. That's not the point." He goes, "I really think we need guys like you in education right now." I said, "Well, I don't know." He said, "Well, just give it a thought, will you please?" I said, "Okay, Coach, I will." And he goes, "Well, it's really good to see you. Glad you're back." So I left that conversation feeling very good. And that's what good role models and mentors can do. They don't care about what you may have failed at previously. It's all about what's ahead. It's not about, I'm down and out. It's like, where are you going to go? So I did not take his advice right away. And for 3 years, I was in the finance world, and I was miserable. Miserable. Some of you are shaking your heads. And so I finally decided to get into education, and I realized this is my calling. How did he know that? How did he know that this is where I belong? Again, good role models and mentors. They care enough, they're invested enough that they know you and they know what's best for you. And then there was Royce Jones, who was athletic director and head football coach at Norfolk Academy. And his impact is hard to quantify, because he was part of my life for 35 years. He was almost like a second father. And he has two sons who I got close to, and I spent as much time in their house as I did my own. But he was a man who could have done anything. Royce Jones. He had the talent, he had the smarts, he had the good looks, he had it all. But he chose education. So the moral of that story is he grew up in a Pentecostal holiness church family. Now, anybody familiar with that? Those are the true ceiling scratchers. You know what I'm talking about? They are heavy into the faith, and he grew up in that household. So the things of this world weren't necessarily as important to he and his family as they are to most of us. So he chose education. And when I think about Coach, I never knew him where he wasn't happy. He didn't have you just sensed the joy that he was doing what he's been called to do. And what I learned from him, I learned tons of things, but in the final analysis, what I learned from him was, when you are living the life God has for you, there's this joy that just emanates. It is so obvious. And that was the case with Royce. He was just, he later went on to be an administrator at VMI. So had contact with him there also. But he was always happy because he was living the life he'd been called to. And then finally, my dad, and I'll just leave this here. I had not originally planned on having my dad in this book. Doesn't that sound interesting? Wouldn't you think that would be the first person on the list? When you're talking about role models and mentors, isn't your dad supposedly your first and most important role model and mentor? Well, in many ways, my dad was. And in some ways, he wasn't. That's in the book. But it's important as men that the first thing we do in our capacity as role models and mentors is understand our own story and how we became the men that we are and what influences our dads had on us. Now, that can be painful. And I understand that. For me, it was. Writing this book was cathartic in the sense that I realized some things about my dad that I had never really wrestled with. And I'm 67 years old on Sunday. Where's Tom? Tom's a day older than me. 67 on Sunday, and it took me till my 60s to really understand my dad and our relationship. And the only reason I got to that point was because of this book. And when I originally told my wife, Mary Downey, about this book back in 2018, when I was thinking about it, and I listed the 5 guys that I just mentioned with you guys. She goes, well, what about your dad? I said, what do you mean, what about my dad? She goes, why isn't your dad in the book? Well, everybody loved my dad. He was a very likable guy. And I said, I don't know. I don't know. I was kind of embarrassed. She said, don't you think he needs to be in there? I said, yeah, I guess he does. And so that started a process where I examined my story. It really revealed a lot. So here's the bottom line as we get to the 8 o'clock hour. We are all called, whether you like it or not, whether you want to be or not, we are all called to be the right kind of role model and mentor for the younger generations. It's what's meant to be. Okay? We need to teach these guys. You're not entitled. Life is hard. It's in the Bible. If you knew the Bible, if you had a faith foundation, you would understand. You know, John 16:33. In this world, you're going to have trouble. Well, hell, Jesus just said it right there. What else do you need to hear? You're going to have trouble. What are you going to do? Well, in this day and age, we go play video games. Or we go to the basement and have pizza or whatever. So what I'm trying to do is motivate, especially the 20 to 40-year-old crowd. I think we pretty much get it in this age group. But we are grandparents, so we still have an impact. I want to motivate the young guys to, one, consider growing their faith. Because you're never going to be the man God called you to be unless you get in touch with that. Then second of all, understand that our young guys don't need easy. They need challenges. They need mountains to climb, rivers to cross. They need battles to fight. It's just who we are and what we're about. Don't let them not do those things because that's how you get to be a strong man. So, that is the story of my book. I hope it's going to motivate a lot of people. I had a lot of fun writing it. Writing is a very solitary endeavor. It can be maddening at times, but I really enjoyed it. So there you go. Bob's your uncle, which means that's it. And if anybody has any questions, I'll be glad to answer. The book is releasing on Tuesday. You can get it on Amazon. I brought some copies. I have some soft cover copies. There will be a hardcover version also.